make sure to get the recording button facing. I'm going to announce this, even though it's not going to drag or attract.
Wait, say that again?
Give me 1 second. Mm-hmm.
Oh, charge my phone.
Hold on, I can't really hear you right now. Hold on.
You're chilling, bro.
Okay, so we should be ready. Let's go. So what's up, C? How are you doing?
Yo, I'm chilling. What about you?
What up? Shout out to
Chilling
Official
out though.
Rick.
I'm still
Yeah,
fasting,
Joe here.
obviously, so it's going to be a bit difficult for me to actually speak, but should be working. Shouldn't have my rhetoric too much.
Yeah.
So let's see. So let's just get on to the meat and potatoes, right? So Trinitarianism, we both agree that what Trinitarianism posits is just merely that there are three different persons which subsist in the same existence. So there's one being, which is God, and there are three persons, right?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So what's your definition of a being? Would you agree that a being is that which possesses an essence?
That which possesses an essence.
Yeah, that's how it's usually defined, given like how Aquinas defines it, I'm pretty sure. And other Christian theologians, being is just that which has an essence, and they'll deny that the person has an essence because person just has relational properties, not essential properties. Right?
I'm not sure if that's how they would understand the word being.
So how do you understand the word being if it is not something relating to substance or something that possesses an essence?
So I understand the word being, or it's kind of polysemous, there's multiple meanings, but in this context, when we say that there's one divine being, we just mean that there's one divine essence.
Essence, yes. It's saying it's one being. Divine is just a natural, you could say, nomenclature you add to the term, but you guys are fundamentally saying it's one being, right? They're the same, like Jesus or the Son is God, the Holy Spirit is God, and the Father is God. So they're all the same being, right?
Yeah.
Insofar as they possess the same essence, and the essence would be the divine properties, which is omnipotence, omnipresence, omnibenevolence, whatever you want to say, omniscience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the whole concept here is simply that you guys utilize these divine characteristics as an argument for why they are the same being.
If I understand what you're saying, then I mean, we don't use it as an argument. We just say that they have one essence, they inhere in one essence.
Well, when I say argument in this context, I'm just saying specifically understanding of what it means for them to possess the same being or subsist in the same existence.
I believe so. I don't know if you described it as perfect as I would, but okay, that's fine.
So I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions. Like, for example, if you believe the Leibnizian law, like if you, like, let's say we have two objects. Is it the case that for these two objects to be the same being or the same existence, it has to possess the same essence? Like all the facts of the object A essence would have to be something which shares over to all the facts of object B's essence. Would you agree with this concept or this proposition? Or is there some sort of expostulations or disagreements you have towards this proposition?
If what you're asking me is, in order for two objects to have the same essence, does everything that's true of the object's essence have to be true of the other object's essence? And the answer is
for
yes.
two objects to have to be the same being, for them to subsist in the same existence.
Yeah, so...
Okay, so I think you kind of misinterpreted my point, just to be clear. But wait, I just want to make sure you're not agreeing with something which might, like, mess you up in the long runs, right? I'm not just asking for two objects to possess the same essence. I'm asking for two objects to subsist in the same existence. They have to possess the same essence, correct?
Presumably, yeah.
Okay, cool. And by essence, you just take that to be the essential characteristics of an object, correct? So like that which is entailed from an object exists.
Perhaps not what's entailed by an object existing, but the first thing you said, the essential characteristics, yeah.
Okay, so what's going to be the distinction between a set of properties or characteristics which are necessary for an object to exist, and the characteristics which, if the object would exist, would entail those characteristics existed in return? What's going to be the relevant distinction which makes it the case that the word entail would be something which is contextual inapplicable in this situation or this conversation?
Yes, like, do you agree that if, okay, this is the example that Kit Fine uses, do you agree that if, like, Socrates exists, then the singleton set Socrates also exists in some way?
Excuse me? I don't understand your point.
So the idea is that if Socrates exists, then the singleton
Mm-hmm.
set Socrates also exists. But we wouldn't say that it is an essential characteristic of Socrates to belong to any set. Like that's not something that defines Socrates. So
It's
understanding
not an essential
essential
characteristic to say what specifically?
to say that Socrates belongs to any set. That's not what defines Socrates.
And they said to just take that to be a classification of something?
Yeah.
Of course, it would be necessary. For any defining property which is used to define Socrates, you'd belong to the set which that defining property belongs to by definition.
No, no.
So, for
So
example, Socrates is an object, is a concept, is a thing, and so he'd belong to the set of things,
no,
whether
no,
it
no. So
exists
yeah,
or not exist.
yeah. So it's necessary for Socrates to belong to the set, but the distinction is that we shouldn't understand
But he said
essence
the opposite a
modally.
while ago, did he not?
No, no, no. So what I said is that it's not essential for Socrates to belong to the set. It might be necessary, but I don't understand essence modally. That would be the distinction.
So, hold on. So you don't understand. So when you're using the word essential, you're not using this semantically interchangeably with the word necessary. So when you say, when someone says in metaphysical discourses that something is essential for something else to exist, you don't take that to mean that what they're trying to convey there conceptually is that it is necessary for these sort of characteristics or facts or properties to exist for this given object to even exist. You just take it to be the case that you're saying something which is non-modalistic in nature.
No, no. So
That's what you're telling me right now.
perhaps when you use the word essential in that context, it can be used modally. But what I'm saying is that when we talk about the essence of an object, the essence of an object is not defined by the qualities or characteristics that it possesses in all possible worlds. Because Socrates belongs to the singleton set Socrates in all possible worlds. But if you ask me what Socrates is, like what's the essence of Socrates, I'm not going to say the essence of Socrates is to belong to the singleton set Socrates. I'm going to tell you about his rationality and
What is the
his
singleton set? I can't understand what you're really saying here. I don't know if it's like my mic or something, or it's just your pronunciation. Like, what did you just say about
singleton
it?
set. A singleton set is a set that only has one member. It's like the singleton set Socrates is a set that only contains Socrates.
Okay, so you're saying to me here that it is not necessarily true that Socrates belonged to such a set.
No, 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 no. I'm saying it's necessarily true, but it's not a truth of his essence.
So, what is essence? What is your definition of essence?
What a thing is.
What a thing is. So, all the
Yeah.
facts about a thing would be what an essence is. So that means it
So,
is inclusive. So that means it is inclusive of contingent facts.
no,
You said what the thing is, so it's a description of the thing, correct?
it's not merely a description of the thing. It's the fundamental characteristics of a thing that are irreducible to anything else.
Irreducible. And by irreducible, what do you mean by irreducible here?
Like they can't be broken down further, I suppose.
They can be broken down further, linguistically, descriptively.
Perhaps ontologically.
So what does it mean for something to be ontologically irreducible?
So, like, we might reduce accidents to substances, or we might say that accidents inhere in substances. But substances themselves are just these sorts of things that can't be broken down or depend on anything further. And that's what we're.
Why? So you're saying that the human being as a substance, as a physical substance, is not dependent on anything else in existence because it is a substance?
No, no, I'm not saying it's not dependent on anything else in existence, but it doesn't inhere in anything else. So accidents
You said
exist
a
in
while ago that
substances.
substances don't depend on anything else, but I just gave an example which just agreed reflects dependence relation.
No,
And it would also still be a substance.
I'm pretty sure I used the word inhere.
No, you said depend, verbatim.
Okay, if I said depend, then I meant inhere.
And what do you mean by adhere in this context?
To exist within.
To exist within.
Yeah.
So you think that, do you believe that angels are non-physical?
I'm not quite sure what the distinction is between physical and non-physical, but I take it that they're non-physical, yeah.
Okay, and do angels exist within anything else?
Exist within anything else?
Yes.
No, I don't know what that would mean.
So they're ontologically irreducible, correct?
Yeah.
So that means they would be what? They would be, so just to be clear on this, so they're ontologically irreducible. So in other words, when you're talking about essence here, all you're just referencing are just fundamental properties which are ontologically irreducible in your view.
Yeah, it's like accidents are
And
not
by
fundamental
and by
properties.
ontologically irreducible just means something which does not exist within something else.
Yeah.
Okay, and so when you're talking about not existing within something else, do you think it is the case that it is possible for a spatiotemporal realistic object to have an essence?
Yeah.
Okay, that's possible. So then that means when you're talking about something existing within something else, you're not making a spatial location based claim. You're making a different claim.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of weird to describe how attributes exist in substances. So I just say existing within. When I say within, that
Yeah,
what is it?
so when you say exists within, you don't mean that it is the case that there's a given spatial location in an object and another object occupies the space. You're referencing something else. And the reason why you don't mean this is because you believe it is logically possible for there to be physical objects which has an essence, and all that means is simply it does not exist within something else, given the fact that essence, under your view, is ontologically irreducible. So then, what does it really mean to exist or to not exist within something else if you're not making the claim about physical spatial location? What does that even mean?
I think I can find something for you. I'm not really sure I can explain it further than that. I think I can give you
Hold
some
on. So, what we're
examples.
trying to get clear on, because given how it is generally understood in philosophy of metaphysics, essence describes the essential characteristics of an object, which are deemed to be the properties which are metaphysically necessary for an object to exist, given the concept. Now, what you're telling me here is that you're not using this definition. You just dismiss this conventional scholastic definition. You're like the big boy here. You have your own new definition. Cool. Now, I'm interested in this new definition here. Now, it seems to be the case that this new definition is just a bunch of nonsense to me. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because now you're saying that all it means for something to be an essence of an object is just for it to have a set of properties which do not exist within something else. And then you're telling me that when you're using the word exist within, you're not making the claim about spatiality. You're not making the claim about location. You're not making the claim about any of these stuff. So then what does it really mean to even use the phrase exist within if it is not a claim regarding the description of a spatial location of a given concept or object? I'm just really confused about this, see? Do you mind elaborating with the voice call?
Yeah, so it's sort of difficult, like I said before, to describe how accidents or attributes might exist in relation to substances. You might say like they're bounded to substances, they exist added on to substances. One thing that's clear though is that when we talk about accidents, it wouldn't make any sense to talk about accidents outside of or without referencing the substance that they are, describing. So, like for example, to talk about red, right? Like red as an accident doesn't make any sense to talk about red because what is red? We're presuming a what there. But if I say like bear, like as in like the animal, you know what I'm talking about. So it seems as if red isn't something that can exist apart from an accident, apart from a substance. Sorry, but substances on their own
Okay.
seem to be the sites, I guess, quote unquote, the sites in which accidents
I don't
exist.
even know what you mean by cannot exist without. You're invoking these counterfactual dependency relation type claims, but then when I've asked you for some deeper conceptual analysis and I've ran down the conceptual investigation, it doesn't even seem as if you even understand what you're saying. But with that being said, I'm not trying to like criticize you or anything in that sense, but I'm just going to ask you this question. I'm going to see your view on this. Do you believe it is an essential characteristic, or rather, do you believe it is within the essence of the Son for him to be eternally begotten?
Within the essence of the sun?
Yeah.
No, I don't know what that would mean.
So it's not within the essence of the Son for him to be eternally begotten.
When you say the essence of the sun, you're referring to the divine essence, right?
I'm just talking about essence, whether it is divine or non-divine.
Okay, so if by essence there you mean like the set of characteristics that define the sun as the sun, then like yeah, necessarily the sun means to be begotten, yeah.
Not just that definition, the definition you used, which is just ontologically irreducible properties. Do you take that to be an ontologically irreducible property of the Son? It doesn't matter if it is divine or not. Do you take that property to be ontologically irreducible?
I don't think that the sun possesses properties in the same way that material objects do.
What do you think I'm asking, Frank?
You're asking me whether it's the case that the quality of begottenness is an essential attribute of the Son.
And what do you think I mean when I use the word essential attribute in this context? Do you think I'm using my own definition or your definition regarding ontological reducibility?
If by essential there you just mean some sort of like modal sense, then yes.
No, I'm not using that. I'm using your definition to test your consistency. Is it the case that you believe that the trait of being eternally begotten, is this an ontologically irreducible property?
I don't know what it means to say that the Son has properties.
Wait, so why would you say, so you know what it means for something to be the essence of an object, but you don't know what it means for something to be a property?
No, just in this specific context, like no Thomist is going to say that the Son...
I'm using the same definition we've been using the entire time when me and you have been collectively or mutually using the word property throughout the conversation.
So like maybe like a Thomist would say that the Son has constitutive
I'm not
properties.
talking about just a Thomist, I'm talking about you.
Yeah, so yeah, right? I'm taking the Thomist position, and I was going to elaborate and say that maybe a Thomist would say that the Son has constitutive properties such that, you know, there are these like qualities or characteristics in our mind that we can use to talk about the Son with. But in reality, the Son doesn't bear properties. The Son is just that relation. Right?
Yeah, like so the problem with this is simply what you've just described there is an inclusive condition, right? So what you just talked about regarding constitutive properties and essences, given your own definition, these are inclusive conditions.
Sorry, repeat that.
I'm saying that what you just described, given the Thomistic perspective, and what you're talking about here regarding your definition of an essence, these are inclusive conditions.
I'm not sure what you mean.
What I mean by inclusive conditions is just how it is used in logic. It's just two given concepts or conditions or properties which can overlap with one another. They're compatible.
I mean,
so you can have an object with constitutive properties, and these objects or these properties would be the essence of the object. There's no contradiction.
Yeah, but that's the issue. Essences. Okay, so like we don't consider
that wouldn't sufficiently distinguish the concept you're trying to investigate here from your perspective.
Yeah, so the issue is that essences aren't of particular things in that sense. Essences talk about common qualities. It's like the Son being begotten wouldn't be a part of quote unquote an essence.
Yeah, how are common qualities and essences exclusive conditions? How are they exclusive conditions?
Are common qualities and essences exclusive conditions?
I'm asking you, how are they exclusive conditions?
Yeah, so that's just
why can't you have? Let me just ask this. Let me just ask the question this way: why can't you have an ontologically reducible property, which is quite literally a qualitative property? Why is that logically impossible?
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
I'm asking you, why is it the case that essences, given the way you're using the word essence in this conversation under the trinitarian model, why is that incompatible with qualitative constitutive properties?
Because I don't know. I think the word property or quality is unintelligible outside of the substance it refers to. It's like what a quality is something that defines a substance. When I talk about mass or weight or density, these terms would not make sense without substances that it refers to, right? So that would be...
Is it the case that it is logically inapplicable for a non-substance, just a relation, to have properties?
For a non-substance, just a relation to have properties?
Yeah, like a relation. So think of like a structural realist who believes that the world is primarily reducible to non-substances like structures or relations. Is it logically impossible for such structures to have properties?
I'm not too familiar.
And by definition, they would have properties.
I'm not too...
Yeah, for any non-substance, do you agree that do you agree that the word non-substance have a definition?
The word non-substance has a definition?
Yeah, so the concept of a non-substance, that which is not a substance, do you agree it possesses a definition?
Yeah.
So that means you can have non-substances properties, because for any definition X, there are going to be a set of defining properties which are necessary features of the concept. So then you made a false claim. If you're going to say that it is incoherent, that's not even true.
Yeah, so
Because you both understand what a non-substance is.
I never once in the conversation denied the fact that there could be qualities that have definitions to them. So like red has a definition. That's how we know what we mean when we say the word red. That doesn't change the fact that when we reference red in reality, red is only intelligible in conjunction with the substance it defines. So I don't know what
No,
it
it
would mean for
doesn't,
red to
because
exist.
I just gave an example where we have something which does not refer to any extensional state, right? Which is descriptive of something which is not a substance, conceptually, which we both understand. We both
Okay, but
understand that something which is not a substance would possess or lack the properties of substantive properties, which in itself would be a property. And so that's
yeah,
why
but
we have
like
a
even
definition for such concept.
yeah, but like presumably even if
So
you're a
we both
structural
understand what this
realist,
thing actually is.
but presumably even if you're a structural realist, the relator themselves would still have to be substances, right? Like how can there exist a relation and the relator that are the subjects of the relation are not substances? What would that mean?
What would that mean? You can
Yeah,
have
what would
many
the
relations.
relation what would the relation
You
be
can have a
between them?
regress. You can have a regress whereas there are higher degree of relations which acts as the relata for sub-relations. That's
Yeah,
logically
but,
possible.
yeah, but what would the relations be between? When we talk about relation, there are like objects or
That's
things
a
that are
new
related.
question. The problem is you're questioning the theoretical possibility of there being relata which are relational. I'm saying you can have relata which are relations in and of themselves. The things
Yeah,
related to the relations are going to be some relata which are also other relations.
so wait, relations relate to other relations?
Yes, you can have relations which are act as relata for other relations. Is there a logical contradiction in this current, sir?
I mean, it probably depends on how you define relation.
A relation is just that which is being related.
Okay, so when you say that which is being related, you're saying that that which is being related can relate to another thing that's being related. Can you give me like an example?
An example is not relevant to whether or not this is possible in theory.
It just seems a bit
The
weird
proof
because
for
when
this
I
is
talk
possible
about
is just the fact that there's no contradiction.
no, I don't think it would be possible. Now that I've given it a bit of a
So
think.
where's the logical contradiction, see?
The logical contradiction. You want me to like formalize it, or can I just verbalize why I don't think it's impossible, or why I don't think it's possible?
Just give me the contradiction, just proposition P and proposition not P, which is entailed from what you're talking about here.
The proposition P would be like something like I don't know, relations require substances, and then under your view, relations don't require substances.
Wait, sorry, excuse me, repeat the first part?
Relations require substances, relations don't require substances.
Where do you get that first proposition from?
That relations
What
require
about the
substances.
definition of relations being that which is being related, which entails substantive talks?
Because when we talk about that, we're indexing an object. It's either the case that the object is a substance or an accident. If the object is an accident, then the object cannot exist apart from a substance, and so it wouldn't make any sense to talk
That's
about
not true.
relations. You think accidents can exist apart from
Just because
substances?
just because an object, hold on, just because an object cannot exist without a substance does not mean that the object in and of itself has to be a substance.
So that
You're saying specifically that it is entailed. You're saying specifically it is entailed from something being a relation that there has to be a substance which is related to the relation or is directly causing the relation to exist, right? Nothing you've said demonstrates that.
Wait, so Hori, do you agree that the relator would refer to either a subject or substance or an accident?
No, I don't think this is a true dichotomy. What's the argument for this claim?
Okay, so what else could it refer to apart from a substance or an accident?
The proof for whether or not this is a true dichotomy does not rely on my belief system.
Under my like metaphysical framework, they only exist substances and accidents. I don't.
And
Really
why
have
is
an
your
argument.
metaphysical framework the accurate picture of reality? Why
When I
should
was
anyone give a shit
learning,
about your metaphysical framework? We have a
when I was
solipsist
learning,
for the metaphysical framework of them only existing. Who
Are
gives
you
a
not
shit?
doing an Are you not doing an internal critique?
no, I don't think he is. But look, that I mean, that's
So
besides the
what's the
point. The
what's
reason
the
why
argument though?
Well, clearly he's using the proprietary definition of essence. So I'm breaking down this
hold on,
concept that you cannot even define properly,
I kind
Yeah,
of,
and then
I
just
kind of
want
establishing
to get
that
to the
understand.
even
point,
then
man.
it's going to be still be the
Wait,
case
so
that his view is false. But
I
no
kind of
one
understand.
understands what he's talking about here.
I kind of want to get back to the topic of the Trinity, but I wanted to respond quickly to what you said about.
Yeah, we're trying to understand what you mean by essence because it's just mumbo jumbo.
But I wanted to just respond to the point about my definition of essence being proprietary. My definition of essence isn't proprietary. I mean, you are familiar with who
You
Kit
sure
Fine
about
is,
this?
right?
Let's Google the definition of essence given any philosophical source, scholastic.
What I asked you was, are you familiar with Kit Fine?
Hold on there a second.
Okay, so I'll explain who Kit Fine is.
Okay,
Kit
so
Fine is
I don't even know what you're talking about here, right? Because like even here, the definition specifically says, in philosophy, essence refers to the fundamental defining characteristics or nature of something. You reject the defining characteristics part. You don't believe essence refers to the defining characteristics of something. You literally omitted this from your definition.
I never said that. Wait, can you give me pick times? I'm about to send you something. And I never said that essence doesn't refer to the defining characteristics of something.
Wait, so does it refer to the defining characteristics?
Yeah, it does. But what I said was that.
So then how is it the case that, so that's a contradiction? Because now you've been in a double bind. The double bind here is now you're agreeing essence refers to the defining characteristics of something, but you denied originally that the Son, the eternal begottenness nature, is the essence of the Son, when by definition, the Son would be the part of the hypostatic union, which is eternally begotten by the Father. That's a defining characteristic of the Son. So you'd have to concede, hold on. You'd have to concede to maintain logical consistency that the same thing you deny to be the essence of the Son is in fact the essence of the Son, considering just agreed that essence would be inclusive of the defining characteristic of an object.
So can I have pick terms quickly so I can send this thing and then I'll just respond to whatever the point was?
Sure.
Thank you.
Bruh. Don't disappoint me, bro.
So look, I just quickly searched up Kit Fine. It's like one of his most famous papers. And he says, I'll just read out what the extract says. It says, is that the notion of essence, which is of central importance to the metaphysics of identity, is not to negation, not to be understood in modal terms, or even to be regarded as extensionally equivalent to a modal notion. The one notion is, if I am right,
in the side chat.
The other, it's like a sieve which performs a similar function but with a much finer mesh.
Post it in the side chat.
Like one of sorry. This is like a metaphysician, like a very popular one at that.
Wait, hold on. I'm asking you to post it in the side chat.
Okay, in the side chat. Okay, I got you. Hold on.
Yeah.
So that's all I was
Google
really saying.
AI literally is based off more than 5 citations, all of them being philosophical sources, by the way. Just for the kiddos in the chat. One of the citations, literally, which the AI is getting the information from, is Stanford Encyclopedia. The other one is Britannica.com. The other one is Rootledge.com. And then you have New World Encyclopedia. Well, you have unreliable sources, obviously, like Core and so forth. But Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is one of the references that it is using to determine the definition. So before you try to question the credibility of such, not talking to you, Steve, I'm talking to the other dumb fucks in the chat.
Yeah.
It is based off reliable sources, which is why people use AI overview, by the way, just for information. But continue. What were you saying, Steve?
So I wasn't denying the fact that an essence is a defining characteristic of something. What I was mainly denying was the fact that a quality that's possessed by an object in all possible worlds would be a defining characteristic of that. But
the thing is, what you're saying currently is incompatible with your prior claim.
No, the prior claim that I made.
Because do you know which prior claim I'm talking about?
Yeah, the prior claim that you're talking about is the fact that I said that it would not be a quality of the essence of the Son to be begotten.
No, that's what I'm talking about. No,
right, what are you
the other prior claim I'm talking about is when you agreed that essence would be, in fact, by definition, be inclusive of defining characteristics. All defining characteristics of an object or concept would be necessary conditions of the concept, which is a modal term.
No, so that's
could you give me one defining characteristic of a concept which is not necessary for the concept to be satisfied?
No, so you're misunderstanding the conditional. So like if it's the case that something is essential to an object, then it's the case that that thing is instantiated by the object in all possible worlds. But the converse is not true. Just because something is instantiated by an object in all possible worlds does not make that thing essential to the object.
I'm not talking about, hold on. First and foremost, Yes, it would. Just given your definition, it would actually. And given my definition, it would. First and foremost, yes. And secondly, and it depends on what notion of possible worlds you're talking about. If you're just talking about like nomoologically possible worlds, sure. But if you're talking about like logically possible worlds or metaphysically possible worlds, then yes, it would actually be emblematic of it being the essence of the object. But pushing that aside, right, what I'm saying here is you agree that essence would be the defining characteristics of an object, would be a concession towards the idea that the essence would be something necessary for a given object. Kind of like a bachelor. It is a defining characteristic of a bachelor for a man to be unmarried. Clearly, these are the two defining characteristics. Now, is it the case that a bachelor could exist without him being unmarried by definition or man being unmarried by definition? No. The reason being it's a defining characteristic of such concepts, thus rendering it to be a necessary feature of the concept. So yes, defining characteristics are necessary features of concepts.
Yeah, so I already sort of addressed this, so I don't think I'm going to repeat myself. To respond to the stuff about the sun.
Yeah, so we can just move on to the different point, right?
Yeah, so to respond to the stuff
And
about
I'm just going to give the argument for why it is the case that it would be entailed from what the essence says, that it would not be true that they share the same existence. Now, the obvious for the argument is quite simply that, as we both agree, the essence is the defining characteristic of an object, i.e. it is the characteristics which makes an object what it is, insofar as without these characteristics, the object would not exist. That's what the defining characteristic actually is. The bachelor example and several other examples can be something which satisfies and justifies this conceptual analysis. Now, clearly, it is the case. Do you have something to say at points? Because I was still speaking, by the way.
No, give a formal argument so you can. You're saying
Wait, no, there's no need. I just think
I don't know why I need to give a formal argument, as if this guy gave a formal argument.
I want to make this very clear. I want to make.
Where receives formal arguments, sir?
Wait. I want to make this.
Let me listen to this lapdog first. I want to hear this guy bark.
Yeah, TK. I think no.
What was the formal argument that T gave?
Yeah. Wait. Look, can I just clarify?
I just want you guys to get straight to the point. I think.
You think I'm not getting straight to the point by giving the arguments right here, right now, for there will be a logical contradiction?
I want to make this really clear. So when you talk about essence being the defining characteristics of something, that doesn't mean that like essences are some just like extension of like absolute identity. It's like when I walk around and I look at
no one referenced extensional states.
Wait, let me just finish.
That was like literally redundant.
Let me just finish. Can I just finish? This is actually really important.
Well, you can't complain about you not finishing when you interrupt my.
Wait, just stop. Wait.
Did you not interrupt my point a while ago?
I don't recall, but if I did, I apologize.
Yes, you did. I asked you specifically, what do you got to say since I was not finished?
Yo,
and then the other guy started speaking over me.
Okay, you know what? If you want to continue, then continue. But I need to clarify this point afterwards. Go ahead.
Okay, so what I was saying is quite simply that this is a defining characteristic to be eternally begotten. That's not a defining characteristic shared by the Father, because the Father is not defined to be that which is eternally begotten. Originally, you said for two beings to share the same existence, they have to share the same essence. Clearly, now I've given the reason as to why they would not share the same essence, so they would not subsist in the same existence because they have different essences. So it is logically necessarily true, given these conditions and these agreements, that it is not the case that the Son is identical to the Father from the perspective of being the same identical being. No pun intended.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to make very, very clear, because I had a feeling that this was sort of coming.
And by the way, after me and you're done talking, sorry to cut you off. All of the dick munchers in the chat, the cock eaters, you guys can debate me afterwards. Because I know for a fact your father's seed can do a much better job than whatever you guys are yapping about in the chats right now. Okay?
I would
just make it clear for the loyalty victim.
I
would chew you like fried chicken, bro.
Yeah, so monkeys, you gotta make your dad speak first. He's still speaking, so pipe down first.
The first thing I wanted to address was sort of this idea that the defining characteristics of an object is just some sort of extension or like re-understanding of absolute identity.
Extension.
Like, we wouldn't like walk around.
You're a retard if you think this.
Wait, hold on. So like we wouldn't walk around, and when I look like other humans, I wouldn't say that they all have different essences to what I do. And that's because essences aren't understood particularly, they're understood commonly or universally. They're like things that are possessed by a common group of things, not just things individually possessed by individual things.
Do
And so
you
when
know
you
what an
say that,
extensional
yes,
state of a
wait,
concept
wait,
is?
when you say that the essence is a defining characteristic of something, or what something is, that
Wait, do you
what
know
there,
what's an
what,
extensional state of a concept?
sorry, repeat the question.
You said specifically that definitions hinges on extensions. Do you know what an extensional state of a concept is?
The extensional state of a concept, of course, yeah.
Yes, you use the word extension, E-X-T-E-N-S-I-O-N. Do you know what that means?
I know what it means in both philosophical context and what it means in colloquial senses, yeah.
I'm talking about in the philosophical context.
I know what it means, like the reference
And an
of a concept.
extensional state just
That's not,
refers to the type of thing, the type of object which instantiates a given concept.
yeah, I know I wasn't using it in
Correct?
that sense. When I said extension,
Okay,
I was referring to some
so
sort of
you're
like,
using your proprietary definition again.
no, that's not what's going on here. Extension and intention, like for example, that's like if I say I didn't step on your foot intentionally. You're saying, oh, you're referring to the concept. That's a no. Like there's different ways of using these words. When I used
You're
extension
retarded.
there, okay.
You're using
When I used
extension in the
extension there,
same. If you're not using the definition I just gave, then the word extension would not be something regarding the concept, would it? Because generally
no, when I
speaking, when you're talking about conceptual
Wow.
analyses, hold on. Generally speaking, when you're talking about conceptual analyses, we use extension in the sense where you're talking about a instantiation of a given concept.
no, that's not what I mean. Look, when I used extension there,
So what do
I
you
was just
mean?
referring to some. I was just referring to some additional parts of something else, right? Like that's the definition of extension that's used outside of these
Wait,
philosophical.
sorry, I did not hear what you just said. Repeat it, please.
It's like if I say that I don't know, it's just an extension, like the sword is an extension of my own arm. That's not me talking about some concept being instantiated. That's just me saying it's some additional part of my own arm. And the same way when I said it's an extension of the
So
absolute
just to
identity.
trace this back to the conversation, so by extension, you're not given a definition, but we're just given an example. So what I need to understand here is how is it the case that eternal begottenness would not be a defining characteristic of the Son? How would that be the case?
That's not what I'm denying. What I'm denying is that because it's a defining characteristic of the Son, then that automatically means there's an essence of the Son. That's not how the essence is being understood in the concept,
Wait,
in the conversation.
hold on. Whether or not we're going to use in the modal logic terms here is not even relevant, right? Do you accept, just to be clear in this, do you accept or agree that it is the case that the Son, by definition, would be eternally begotten?
Yes.
Okay, and you agree that this would be a defining characteristic, right?
Of the Son, yes, because there's a definition, yeah.
Okay, good. Yes. Okay, is this a defining characteristic of the Father?
No.
Bro,
Okay,
see,
there's
oh
a
my
concession,
goodness.
right? Because look, hold
No,
on.
but that's okay.
Let me land the
Bro,
argument. Hold on, I'm going to give the argument.
equivocating on what
See,
essence is.
I'm going to give
Come
the
on, bro.
argument. Okay, so you know what happens when like you degenerate monkeys start speaking up in my server? They get the serve me with sandwich because apparently these lapdogs see their dad getting destroyed and they feel the need to talk over me.
Can you pronounce monkey
Okay,
right?
so sorry about that. See, your monkeys are like getting out of control. You might have to put a leash on these lapdogs you have in the background. So I'm going to give the argument for why there's a concession, and then you can show me why I'm incorrect in this. Okay, see?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So here's the reason as to why I conceded indirectly. So we both shook hands on the point that essence, well, let's just start from the beginning. We both agreed that for two concepts or objects to share the same being or to subsist in the same existence, and we have this on the recording, which is great, they have to share the same essence. Now, after we agreed on this, later on in the conversation, we both agree and we shook hands on the point that essence, by definition, would be inclusive of the defining characteristics of an object. Now, we both agreed that the Father does not share the same defining characteristic of eternal begottenness of the Son, which would indicate that they do not share the same essence by definition, given we both agree that essence would be the defining characteristic of an object, irrespective of whether or not it is necessary, that's relevant. The fact of the matter is we both agree these are the defining characteristics of an object. Cool. Now, that would mean that the Father and the Son, given the fact that they do not share the same defining characteristics, would not share the same exact essence, and so given their initial agreement in this dialogue, they would not be something which subsists in the same existence thus falsifying the proposition that they are the same being, which would be a debunk to Trinitarianism, which states that the three hypostases are the same being. They subsist in the same existence. So Trinitarianism gets contradicted.
Okay, so like I'm going to repeat this one more time. Essence is not understood particularly, it's understood in terms of kind. So when we, the Thomists, say that, you know, they have one essence, we're saying that there's one kind there. Essences are kinds, right? Like in the most like simplest way to put it. It's why I also said that when I walk around amongst humans, I don't say we all individually have our own essences. There's like one human essence, because there's one human kind. The same way there's one God kind or there's one God class. And so the response that because the Father has a different defining characteristic than the Son, that therefore they have different essences, is just to misunderstand how the word essence is being used. If by essence you just mean the, you know, set of properties that, you know, define an object particularly, then of course they have different essences because they're different persons. And to be different persons has to be a different quality possessed by both things. But that's not how we're using the word essence. So I don't actually think this is an attack on Trinitarianism.
Yeah, the problem with this, see, is that first and foremost, a lot of Christian Thomists would disagree with you on this. They would say that them being different persons do not entail them having the same or different essences. They would actually say, even though I disagree with their belief, I believe that it would entail such trivially. A lot of Christian Thomists would say that it does not entail such because when you're talking about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit respectively, what they're referencing there are relational properties, not essential properties, which is what the essence actually is. And so after they say this, hold on, I cut out for a second. And so after they say this, they'll then argue that when you're talking about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, they're just merely talking about different roles and not different ontology. So they'd be the same being, but they'll be playing different roles, and so they're just different in relations, not in virtue of essence. Now, so first and foremost, your view is not even the same as majority of Christian Thomists who defends Trinitarianism. Secondly, if you agree that they would have different essences, and you originally said in this dialogue on the recording, you said, what you told me is that it is the case that for two objects to share the same being, to subsist in the same existence, which by the way is necessarily, which has to be true for the Trinitarians to be true, you said for this to be satisfied, they have to have the same essence. You said this on the recording. Now, considering such in the perspective, and you just agree that clearly they do not have the same essence in virtue of them not being the same persons, then you just conceded that they would not be the same being. There's nothing difficult to understand about this.
I mean, would you like to conclude then?
Oh, I would love to conclude. Starting off with you, C.
Okay, I'll just conclude first. I'll give a brief conclusion. So, in conclusion, I don't really think Apollo attacked the Trinitarian position. So, essence is defined as in like as opposed to existence. So, like, you know, when we talk about humans, we might say that there's one human essence, but there's different instances of the human essence or something like that. We wouldn't say that there are individual human essences or individual essences that humans possess, because I would just remove what essence is, and essence is something that's common. It's a kind. And so when we say that the Father, Son, and Spirit are all one in essence, they're one in kind. So they're one in the type of thing that they are, that being the divine thing. And so if you say to me, do the Father and Son differ in essence? Obviously, the default response is no, because I understand essence to be in relation to kind. And if you ask me, are the Father and Son of different kind? The answer is no, they're both of the same kind, the divine kind. But Apollo has a different understanding of essence, some sort of modal understanding where he takes essence to be the sorts of qualities or characteristics that an object necessarily has in all possible worlds, or the sorts of qualities or characteristics that if an object lacks, the object cannot exist in any possible world or in whatever possible world. Under that view of essence, then it obviously follows that the Father and Son have different essences. But then that's just not attacking the Thomist view. Like all Thomists are going to agree that under that definition of essence, the Father and Son have different essences. It's just not what we mean when we say essence. And so I don't really think this proved the point that he was trying to prove, because the word essence in his argument is distinct from the word essence that's used by people like Aquinas. So, yeah.
Okay, just to kick things off with my conclusions, I just want to. Who is this monkey speaking? Like, what do I have to tell these like monkeys every single time when I'm speaking and don't speak over me? Just a basic common courtesy and rule on the server. Yeah, hold on there a second. Let me see which monkey's speaking real quickly. Hold on there a second. Okay, the person is on mute. Got you. Okay, let's just restart the conclusion. Someone interrupted my point. So just to kick things off, it's pretty obvious that my opponent has been radically or severely confused on his own points. The funny thing is, in his conclusion and as a response to what I just said, the main point he tries to communicate here is simply that I'm using a different definition from what Thomas Aquinas uses, which is I don't even agree with this. But regardless of such, he proclaimed that the definition of essence that he was utilizing in this conversation or dialogue for the sake of debating on the Trinity is something which maps onto Aquinas' definition, which funnily enough, I granted his definition. I was borrowing his definition and I extrapolated on the basis of his definition that his view would be incorrect necessarily. The reason being that he agreed on recording that essence is identical to the defining characteristics of an object. Now, essence as a whole is not confined to divinity. You can have a non-divine essence. So if you're going to say, which he did say on the recording, that for these or for any object or any two concepts to be identical in being, they have to be the type of thing which shares the same essence, right? Then given that specific proposition and him defining essence in virtue of defining characteristics, then him agreeing they do not have the same essence would entail that they would not be the same being given his own definition. And I'm not using my definition of him saying his views logically contradictory or is necessarily false given his definition. I'm using his definition. When I say given his concept of defining characteristic, I'm saying I'm not invoking in the modality term or concept. I'm just invoking the fact, which is him agreeing that the Father is not defined in this manner, but the Son would be defined in the manner of being eternally begotten, which, as I've emphasized on numerous occasions repeatedly, would be an entailment of his view being false. So that's my conclusion, and I'm going to gladly end the recording here. GG's.